Okay, let's get started with part one, which is all about inspecting the page that you want to eventually scrape. And we're going to look at a couple of different tools that you can use for that, starting off with just exploring the website as a normal user, which means you go there with your browser and you essentially just click around and find out how is it structured and how does a normal user interact with this page. Then we're going to look at information that is hidden in URLs. There's actually a lot of information in there that can help you with understanding how the site is structured and how you can extract information from it, also on a programmatic basis. And then we're going to look at inspecting the site even more deeply using developer tools. If you don't yet know what developer tools are, don't worry about it. We're going to talk in depth about it in this chapter later on. So just know for now that it's a way for you that's built into the browser where you can inspect the structure of the website that you're working with and learn a lot more about it. Okay, let's get started with exploring the website, starting off just as a normal user in your browser. See you in the next lesson. Okay, so I'm a normal user and I just want to look for some jobs on the website. So I'm going to head over there on my browser and just take a look at it. You can see inside of this Distributor Notebook that you also have access to in the course materials. We have a link to Indeed.com down here under this heading, Explore the Website. So that's what I'm going to follow. I just command click it to move over, open it up in a new tab, and then take a look at it. You can see that this one links to the worldwide Indeed page, which is just a distinction because there's country-specific ones that you could click on. So feel free to use your own country if you're interested in searching in your own country, in your own language. I believe that all of the structures of the websites are the same, so the scraping should work anywhere. They just have somewhat different URL endpoints. If you use this worldwide one, it's going to search in the US. So I'm going to start off by typing my search here. I want to look for a Python job, and I want to look for it in New York. And then I just go ahead and click Find Jobs. And here are the results. So this is what I would do just as a normal user. I'm looking for a job, Python job in New York. I type in my search queries and then I get the results here. So what I can see is that there are like this kind of blocks here on the site that contain some information. And it looks like the first one is highlighted, which from my assumption here is like that this is probably related, that here on the right, I can see some information that relates to this one, fits with the heading here as well. So if I click on this one, I expect that this information here is going to change to the new job. And it does indeed. So I get some information about the company here. I'm also going to dismiss this down there so we have a bit more screen space. And I can keep scrolling and clicking on these and just get information about the jobs. And then I also have some other options here. Looks like I can apply, which is relevant for me if I'm looking for a job. So if I click this, I expect it's going to take me to a different page related to that specific company. And yeah, it does. So this takes me away from Indeed.com. Their job is done. They gave me the connection to this company that is looking for someone. And then here I can directly apply. So most of those cards are going to have some possibility to apply. So that's something interesting. And then there's also this option. It looks like I can star them or heart them. For this, I probably need some kind of account on Indeed. So I need to sign up or create an account. And then I can probably like save these. Yeah. Okay. So as you see, I'm just clicking around and exploring to find out how is this page structured and what's the information that I want to get from this page. And for now, it looks like we're going to focus on this part here. So this column, essentially, that has all the search results, that has some title of the job, it has a location, and it has a bit of information. Plus, also, it's going to contain in here a link to even more information that opens up here on the site. So if I can collect all of this information, that's pretty cool. And that's what I'm going to focus on right here. So feel free to explore the site some more, just in the way that I did now. Scroll around, click around, think what you expect, and see what clicking does. The better you understand your site, the easier it's going to be to scrape it eventually. And also remember, this is just step one. And in the next lesson, we're going to look at the information that you can get out of the URLs up here. See you there. In this video, we're going to find out what information is hidden in the URLs and what you can do to extract the relevant pieces of information for you and use it for your web scraping. So if you think back to the page, to the search results that we had before, when you look up here in the browser bar, you can see that like this part, still the highlighted part here, that seems like understandable. And then it comes into some sort of somewhat garbled looking text, even though you can see Python in here. And there's also something that relates to New York, which seems to relate to this search that we put in there, but there's a lot of like somewhat cryptic information, right? So I want you to understand these URLs a bit more because it's going to be a big asset for your web scraping skills. So here I have this URL that looks pretty similar to what we just saw over there in the browser bar. And I'm going to pick it apart because it's a bit difficult to understand if you look at it just like this. So we have two main parts that we're going to look at. So on the left side, I grouped all of these parts together as the base URL. You can dive deeper, and this consists of a couple of pieces. Again, like you have a protocol here, a subdomain, then a domain, and then a part of a path as well. Usually what you're concerned with as a normal user is the domain. That's what you're going to type into the browser bar to get to the page, and then usually you navigate using the visual interface of the page. But for everything that concerns us here, this is the base URL. And then we have something interesting happening here on the right side that is different. And it all starts off with this question mark. So you can think of this as a question, essentially, that you're asking to the web app that sits over there on the server. So it's a query that you're sending over there to get some response. And that's why this part is called the query parameters. So this is still a little confusing, so I want to pick it apart for you and talk about each of the different pieces in here one by one. At first, we have the question mark, which starts the whole query. It consists of two query parameters, this specific query. We have the first parameter that says Q equals Python, and then we have the second one that says L equals New York. And these two parameters are separated from each other with an ampersand symbol. So again, we start the query with a question mark, then we have parameters that are in the format of a key value pair, essentially. When you think of it from Python terms, like you have here the key, then you have an equal sign, and then you have the value to it. These belong together as a parameter, then you have a separator, and then another parameter. And this can keep going. So you can have another separator, another query parameter, etc., etc. And that's how the information for the question that you're sending to the server is encoded in the URL. Now let's head back over to the browser and look at this again. So up here, again, we have this base URL, and then here the query parameters. You can see we're asking for Python. So it seems like the key for the question that you're asking, and that's a pretty common one, this Q, is Python, which relates to this, what are you looking for? Then we have the ampersand, the divider between the different query parameters, and then an L here. That's a bit different to see that it's an L, but this is L for location, and then New York, that's location. And then here's another query parameter, and I don't actually know what this is about, but it's some sort of probably related to which of the boxes are clicked. Let's see, if I click this, you can see that this hash here changes while the rest stays the same. So this third part here is another query parameter, and that just relates to which of the boxes are currently clicked. I can get rid of this and reload it, and we're going to be at the top of the page, and the first one automatically selects. Okay, so you can play around with this somewhat. You can go ahead and say, what if I change this? So I'm going to look not for Python jobs, but let's say I'm looking for software developer. And you can see that up here, the query parameter changes. The Q does not point to Python anymore, but it points to software developer now. New York is still the same. If you change this, it's going to be something else as well. Now, what happens if you just change it up here? I could go in here and say, I am adventurous and I'm looking for a Rust job. And you can see that also the website changes. So whether you type your query in here or you type it up there in the query parameters is the same for the page, because all you're doing is sending this question to the server, and then the server returns as a response these job postings. And that is how the query parameters relate often to information that you can put in manually to the page, but not only by typing something specific, as it happened over here, because it can also be a click. You see, like the third query parameter that we have up here, it's not something that I type anywhere, but the user input that I'm doing is by just clicking on one of the boxes. This is how this changes. And you can also see that since this is a hash, it's not really something that you as a user should be concerned about. And as a matter of fact, usually when you just use a website normally, you don't deal with this query parameters directly, but you deal with the user interface. But being aware of this connection, that when I change something in here and submit these changes, then the query parameters up here change, is a really important connection to make in your mind, because this is going to help you a lot when you're scraping the information from the page, because the way that you're going to be able to interact with the server is through queries that you're sending in the URL. Okay, so keep this connection in mind and understand that you have this question mark that starts off the query parameters, then key value type pairs of information separated by ampersands, and that this is a way that you can send information to the server and receive your responses back from there. And that's all for this lesson. See you in the next one when we dive even deeper and look at this page with our developer tools. Here we are in the final lesson about inspecting the page, and we're going to do a deep dive now by using developer tools. I'm going to head back over to the search results. Here we are, and I'm currently using Chrome, so your menu items might be a bit different to access the developer tools, but each modern browser contains developer tools, so some equivalent exists for anything that you're using be it Safari or Firefox. In Chrome, you head over here, you say View, and then there's the developer option. And here you can open up developer tools. There's also keyboard shortcuts that you can use, or you can also right-click and say Inspect. So each of those things open up the developer tools. And you can see there's a lot of stuff going on here. We're not too concerned with all of it, so I'm going to click some of it away. What we're mostly interested in are the elements here. And you can see I'm going over these with my mouse here, and then you can see the corresponding things light up on the left on the page. So this, what I can see here, is the page structure. That's the document object model of the page that I'm inspecting here. And you can just think of it essentially as the HTML that builds the page. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can inspect it more. For example, you can click this little thing up here that gives you an option to hover over a page here. And then if you click it, you can see it corresponds over in the HTML structure. You can click it and it takes it to where is this specific element inside of the code. And also it works the other way around as well. I believe like the other way around is with highlighting, so you can hover over it and you can see where it highlights. But this is a nice way if you're, let's say, somewhere deep down on the page, you don't know where you are and you want to figure out where is this in the code. I can go ahead and click this, and then it takes me there and highlights this. Okay, so with this power of inspecting the page, we want to remember, you said earlier that what you want to get actually from this page is the information inside of these cards here on the left side. And this looks like it's a column that essentially has a list of these cards in there with the information about the jobs. So let's see if you can find this HTML element using the developer tools. So if I hover around here, this looks like a single card. Can I see all of the cards? So how would I highlight all of this? There's something like this. So if I click, I might have missed it, but it's okay up here as well. You can see we have results top if I hover over it in the code, and that's not really what we're looking for. But if I go a bit deeper, what we have here, still not job posting anchor. Okay, so here I have one card, but I want to be able to access all of the cards. So I have to go a bit higher up, and here it is. So this looks like it's a TD element with the ID results column. I clicked it, so it's highlighted, and you can see that if I'm on this, this seems to contain all the information that we're interested in. So this element, TD with the ID results column for this specific page, contains the information that I'm interested in scraping from here for now. Okay, so you can see it's like there's a lot of HTML code in here, and it's easy to get a bit like confused about it. But just keep in mind that the main thing that you want to identify here is like, how are you going to be able to address the information that you're interested in? And one of the main pieces here is like, okay, so this is the whole column that contains all of the information of the search results. That's interesting. And then another thing that you can go ahead and inspect by yourself some more is going to be these specific cards. So one of these cards, you can go in here and expand it. And then you can see that there's a bunch of different elements in here that are all interesting for us. So we have the title, there's a link that's going to be interesting, and then also the name of the job. Then we have something else down here in the class SJCL. I'm not sure what that means, but we can see that it contains the name of the company, which might be interesting. And it contains also the location down here, I believe. Let's see. And you see, I'm just switching between scrolling directly inside of the HTML code here, and then also inspecting an element by clicking on it in the page directly. Your task is to explore one of these elements some more now by yourself. Make sure that you have somewhat of an understanding of what's going on, where is something nested inside, what are the pieces of information that you're interested in, and don't get too overwhelmed with all the HTML code, because we're going to use Python to parse through this mess here and just pick out the information much easier than it is by just going through it with your eyes. But having an understanding of where things are located and where does the information live that you're interested in is really important, because you're going to need to target it specifically with code. And that's all for this lesson. I hope this helps. Keep playing around with this, and just keep in mind that these developer tools are pretty powerful, give you a way of understanding the structure of your website, and that this is very helpful for your web scraping. So let's do a quick recap on part 1, inspecting your website. This is actually a very important part of the web scraping process, because you really need to understand how is the website structured and how do you interact with it before you know how to scrape it. So what you learned in here is that you first want to go and explore the website as a normal user, which means just heading to the URL with your browser and clicking around the website, essentially seeing how would you interact with it if you weren't going to be using it with a script to scrape the information, but just using your hands and your eyes, essentially. Then next, you learned how to decipher the information that is hidden inside of URLs, the parts that the browser uses to communicate with the site, but that you as a normal user usually don't have to worry about. But there's information in there, and you learned about query parameters and how these are structured and how you can add information in here, change it even up in the URL, and the website's going to change. And the other way around, if you change something on the website and submit the information, then the URL is going to change. So this connection is important, so keep it in mind. And your way of interacting with websites here are the query parameters. And then finally, you looked at using developer tools to even deeper inspect the website that you're working with. And you learned how to open them up through a menu item or right-clicking, and then you can hover over different pieces of the website and see their corresponding code in HTML, or the other way around, click on the HTML and then see the page structure that relates to it light up. And like this, you can expand, collapse, figure out what are the actual pieces of information in the HTML structure that contain the information that you want and that you're going to want to target in your scraping and parsing later on. Okay, so that's enough working with the browser for now. It's time to write some Python code. We're going to move over to part 2, where you will learn about scraping the website.